In 2020, I made it my personal goal to try to read at least one nonfiction book every month for the entire year, and I actually succeeded at that. I mean, 2020 was a pretty forgiving year, but I can't really complain too much. I actually learned a lot this year, and I'm hoping that I can share a lot of the information that I learned from these books with you guys. So in this year-end edition of Enginomics, I wanted to go over my top 10 books that I read this year. So before we get into that, please hit the like button below and definitely subscribe if you want more content like this in the future. So my first book that I read this year was Cant Hurt Me by David Goggins, and this book was awesome. It's fantastic. It made me want to run through a freaking wall and then dive into a freezing cold pool of water. It was awesome. And this guy is just the most inspiring figure ever. He had a difficult home life. It's his autobiography, by the way. It's about his difficult home life that he had growing up and about how he kind of overcame adversity. He joined the Marines and then eventually went on to Army Ranger training. And then eventually he actually became an ultra marathon runner. And ultra marathons, for those who don't know, are these 100-mile, 100-mile races that you go and you just do it all in one straight stretch. This guy is incredible, and he really kind of just goes over his shifting perspective on life, on race, on overcoming obstacles, and to summarize it in like the best possible way, it's about callousing the mind and chasing discomfort. Like I said, this book's awesome. You should definitely check it out. The second book I read this year was Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell, and if you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, you're already going to know where this review is going. Malcolm Gladwell, for those who don't know, is kind of a pop scientist. He kind of goes and does deep dives on interesting topics and weird little quirks about the world around us, and this book is basically more of the same. In this book, he kind of focuses in on kind of the interactions that people have with each other when they don't really know their background and where they're coming from. And these types of interactions that Gladwell outlines in this book are becoming more and more likely because the world around us is moving so fast, and you're going different places faster and faster, and you're going to run into people who you really have no idea who they are, what their background is, and how to understand them. So his book, again, like if you like Malcolm Gladwell, you're going to like this book. If you haven't, definitely check out Malcolm Gladwell. His other books are fantastic. I definitely recommend David and Goliath, The Tipping Point, and my personal favorite is Outliers. Definitely check out Outliers. I would say that my only problems with this book is that it doesn't really have the same like quality like through line that the rest of his works do, but I really think it's still a really good read and you should check it out. Especially check it out on Audible. For those who don't know, Gladwell has a podcast called Revisionist History where he does little micro deep dives into little topics here and there. And this audiobook is read by Gladwell in the same kind of tone and the same style that he makes these revisionist history episodes. So it's super interactive. He has sound clips, he has music, he has the people who he's talking about in the book reading the specific lines that they actually said. So it's a good listen to, actually. The third book that I read this year was The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And this book was kind of a dark horse for me because I didn't really know what to expect. I've heard that it's great, and the fact that it's kind of survived and became like this international bestseller, even though it's been like written in like the 5th century, I believe. I'll correct that if I'm wrong there. But this book is not about strategizing war and like how to kill and whatnot, but it's really a people's book. It's about understanding people. It's about leadership. It's about patience and preparation. And I guess the fact that like these lessons that this war general had thousands of years ago, the fact that they still carry on today is honestly really impressive, and definitely a great read for anyone who can see themselves in a position of leadership. So the fourth book that I read this year was So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Ron Swanson. Jon Ronson, that's who it's by. And this book should be required reading for anyone who's spending any amount of time on the internet, especially Facebook and Twitter, because this book really dives into kind of the people who you wouldn't think about being victims of the internet. This book dives into their lives, their missteps. It covers two cases. One, an academic who kind of messed up his career by some things that he said. And the second by a woman who tweeted an off-color joke, and as a result, both of them were canceled on Twitter. And the book kind of follows the fallout of that and the way that these people felt and the way that, honestly, like, even though you have the ability to put yourself out there on the internet pretty easily, especially through platforms like Twitter, it doesn't really mean that you're a public figure. And the kind of things and the kind of lynch mobs and witch hunts that result from this can kind of change these people's lives irreversibly forever. I think like my biggest problem with this book is that it just doesn't give a concrete solution of what we can do to fight this frontier justice. Great read, very, very provocative, but overall no solution. And speaking of things that are existentially terrifying and have no solution, that brings me to number 5, which is Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. This book is really long, a little dry in parts, but it goes over the threat and the rise of potentially artificial intelligence systems, specifically general intelligence systems. And this book covers the following. It covers how AI might eventually rise and how we might accidentally or intentionally create it. It also covers the control problem. What happens when we create a being, a mind that is much greater than the human one, and also what happens to that mind when it sets on a mission to achieve a goal or a task that we may ask it to do. It kind of says, like, what happens if this artificial being interprets our requests in a way that is actually not what we want it to do. So say we want it to make paper clips, and we want it to make as many paper clips as possible. Well, what if in trying to achieve that task, the artificial being decides that, hey, humans are actually really good at creating energy to make more paper clips. So what if that artificial being enslaves us all and turns us into paperclip making machines? That's utterly terrifying and a little existentially scary. So this book goes into a lot of detail on this, and it also kind of goes into the different types of artificial intelligences, how they may arise, and just a variety of different kind of things related to this existential problem that isn't as far off as you think. So check this one out. It's a little bit more technical than the other books that I read, but definitely recommend it if you're interested in that kind of thing. So the 6th book I read was Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis. Oh, there's a ladybug. Okay, I think we're good. Michael Lewis, for those who don't know, is the author of Moneyball and The Big Short. He's an economist, and this is kind of his one of his intro books. It kind of outlines his time at Salomon Brothers, which is an investment banking firm in the 80s, and it's like what you think of when you think of investment banking in the 80s. There's pranksters, there's people making millions of dollars here and there. It's just a lot of dishonesty and just an honestly just totally toxic work culture. In an autobiographical way, it kind of highlights his experiences all the way from the beginning, where they kind of just let the dogs loose into the pit and let them all fight and make deals here and there and selling junk bonds and just all these things, all the way until like kind of the end of his experience there, where he's really losing motivation and he's just feels like he's not a good fit, but they keep dangling the carrot a little bit further with Christmas bonuses and gifts here and there. It's a really interesting look into just toxic work culture, in addition to just the 80s trading market. So the 7th book that I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And this book is kind of interesting because it kind of highlights the different ways that different people look at money. Robert Kiyosaki grew up in Hawaii, in Honolulu, where his real dad, his poor dad, as he calls him in the book, I know, not very flattering, he calls him that, and he also calls his friend's dad, who is a business tycoon in Hawaii. He takes a look at his rich dad and his poor dad and kind of compares them in their views on money. While his poor dad looks at money as this burden that must be made and must be worked for hard every day in your job just to pay bills and get through life, his rich dad actually looks at money a different way, which is as an opportunity and the ability to make more money. As far as financial books go, if there's anything that you want to read this book for, it's its understanding and explanation of cash flows. This book was really interesting in that regard, and also, I guess, just changing your mind on how money works and what it's for. If you're kind of interested in cash flow and kind of changing your perspective on how you view economics, definitely recommend checking it out. So the 8th book that I read this year was Superfreakonomics by Dubner and Levitt. And this book is a follow-up to their previous book, which is called Freakonomics, in which they kind of go out, it's two economists from the U of Chicago, and they go out and they view the world and view its problems through the lens of economics. And even for not an economist like myself, it made me infinitely more interested in economics. In this book, they tackle some pretty daunting problems such as climate change and terrorism in a really analytical and actually kind of funny way. You got to read it to believe it. But these two are actually really good and really insightful about kind of the minutia of human behavior and how that kind of plays into the global economic scale. Would definitely recommend checking this one out as well. So the ninth book that I read this year was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this book was really interesting because it kind of takes a deep dive into the psychology associated with habit forming. And habit forming, honestly, it's not really a thing that I thought of a lot. Sure, I have my habits like brushing my teeth before I go to bed and right when I wake up. But it kind of goes into how to form new habits. And like for something as complicated as, say, if you want to work out every day or read a book. So like for that, it's more complex. And he kind of goes off to say that you need to create these systems that allow you to set you up for success. So say if you set your running shoes out every night before you go to sleep, you're more likely to go on a run the next day. So you kind of create visual cues and this cycle that allows you to start forming habits. And this book, honestly, really great read. Definitely check it out. Super easy. James Clear has some pretty interesting ideas on human psychology that I really never thought about. And it definitely encouraged me to go out and start forming and be more just kind of conscious about my actions and what I'm doing habit-wise. And finally, the last book that I read this year, number 10, is The Defining Decade by Meg Jay. I really liked this book, and as someone who is starting off in their 20s, this book definitely gave me kind of an inspiration to think about where my path is headed. Just a quick outline of the book. This book defines the defining decade as your 20s, and kind of that inflection point between your childhood and your adulthood, kind of where you can make decisions, make choices, and kind of set yourself up on a path for success. One of the most interesting parts about this is that she is a psychologist, so she kind of dives into the decision making, the mindset that a lot of people are going through, and the uncertainty. She definitely highlights the uncertainty because the 20s can be some of the most turbulent and frustrating times for a lot of people. I definitely recommend checking this book out, especially if you're starting off in your 20s. It actually kind of inspired me to make my other video about finance in your 20s because I thought that was kind of a lacking part of her mindset there. But besides that, I definitely would recommend checking it out. And all the links for these books will be down in the description. So you should be able to go and get them on Audible or Amazon or whatever platform that you might want to. Before you go though, I want to hear from you guys. What are some of the books that you read this year that you really, really liked? And what are some books that I should check out in 2021? Leave them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to anyone who writes a comment. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. If you like this video again, hit like. Definitely subscribe if you want more content like this. This is my last video in this studio here, so wow, I'm giving myself more credit than I deserve, but this little alcove here, so I'm actually moving to Reno, so I'll catch you guys out there, out west, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.